The storm had come from nowhere, or so it seemed. One moment, the sky over the Silverline expanse had been a hazy blue quilted with soft shifting clouds. The next, an ink-black wall of thunderheads towered over the horizon, swallowing the light with unsettling speed. From the deck of the Valor's Wing, the largest airship in the Western Trade Convoy, the storm looked less like weather and more like an enormous creature stretching across the heavens, ready to devour anything that dared. Fly near. By the time the first fork of lightning split the sky, the wind had already begun to howl. The ship lurched sideways, its wooden frame groaning like a wounded beast. Sailcloth snapped violently, metal buckles clattered, and crew members stumbled across the slick deck, grabbing at whatever they could to keep from being hurled into the swirling void below. Captain Reddick stood at the bow, his boots braced wide apart, his coat flapping like the wings of some furious bird. He was a broad-shouldered man, anchored more by stubborn will than by any sense of self-preservation. His grizzled beard was wet with rain, and his eyes, usually bright with the confidence of a man who'd outmaneuvered sky pirates and navigated through needle-thin canyons, were narrowed, scanning. He'd flown through storms before, even savage ones, but this wasn't a storm. This was an executioner wearing a storm skin. The clouds boiled overhead, swirling in unnatural spirals. The lightning didn't merely flash, it crawled across the sky like glowing serpents. The air itself vibrated with energy, humming at a pitch that made the teeth ache. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The crew knew it, too. 17 men and women stood frozen in their stations, looking to their captain with the kind of hope only a leader could provide. But Reddick felt something sink inside him as the helm jerked violently, nearly ripping itself from its socket. The Valor's Wing dipped hard. Someone screamed as a barrel rolled across the deck, smashing into the railing before crashing overboard. Hold fast, Reddick bellowed, forcing his voice to rise over the roaring wind. Damn it, hold fast. But holding fast wouldn't fix what was coming. The storm drove the ship downward again, and this time the mast cracked, a sharp, splintering sound that sent every heart plummeting. A chunk of wood the size of a man's arm snapped free and flew across the deck, grazing the shoulder of a young deckhand who yelped and dropped to his knees. Reddick grabbed the railing to keep himself upright. Rain stung his face like needles. The ship shuddered beneath him, and with a cold certainty that settled into his bones, he knew the truth. They weren't going to make it. He had seen ships torn apart by smaller storms than this one. He had watched vessels vanish into cloud vortices never to be seen again. He had told comforting lies to the families of crew who had been swallowed by the sky. But he had never spoken defeat aloud. Until now, he turned to face the crew who stared at him with wide eyes and soaked faces, searching for a plan, an order, anything. The storm raged behind him, black lightning spiderwebbing across the clouds like cracks in a glass dome. Listen to me, he shouted. The crew quieted, though the wind nearly stole his words. This storm, this devil-plagued hell, it's stronger than anything we've faced. The controls are shot, the masts damaged, and the stabilizers aren't responding. If the winds take us any lower, the ship lurched again. Several crew members slid across the deck, their boots skidding on the rain-slick wood. The ship's lanterns flickered, casting frantic shadows. Reddick raised his voice, which trembled despite his effort to control it. Brace yourselves, he said. All of you. Do what you can, say your prayers, hold your ground. He paused. Swallowing hard. Today, his voice cracked. Today, we are dead. The words struck the crew like a cannon blast. Some gasped. Some froze in disbelief. A few cursed, and others simply stared at the captain as though watching a pillar crumble. For a moment, the entire deck felt impossibly still, as if even femme. The storm wanted to hear those words spoken aloud. The captain rarely addressed the possibility of death. He believed doing so invited it. But this time, fear outweighed superstition. A young navigator, barely 20, clutched the railing and whispered, "No, no, he can't be serious." Another crewmate squeezed his eyes shut, lips moving in silent prayer. The storm screamed around them, the sky flashing with violent light, but it was the silence of the crew, their stunned acceptance, that made everything feel suddenly heavier. Captain Reddick bowed his head, not in surrender, but in sorrow. They had flown as a family, and he believed he had just signed the end of them. But as the storm tightened its grip around the airship, twisting the sky into a violent vortex, something unexpected happened. A ripple of movement near the navigation bay door. A figure stepped forward, small compared to the towering chaos, but moving with purpose rather than panic. A woman the crew knew only in passing. The quiet one. The engineer who rarely spoke. The one who always worked alone, fixing things. No one else understood. Her name was Deviece, and though no one yet knew it, the fate of the Valor's Wing was about to shift. Deviece had been below deck when the storm first struck, crouched beside the humming core of the auxiliary engine. She'd felt the first violent shudder of the ship through the metal plating beneath her boots. She'd felt the second one even more sharply, rattling the loose tools on her workbench and nearly toppling a jar of copper bolts. But she kept working, because Deviece always kept working. She wasn't one to panic, not when an engine sputtered, not when circuits overheat, not when steam tanks threatened to burst. She dealt with problems by fixing them, not by fearing them. But when she heard the captain's voice, sharp, raw, almost desperate, bark out the order to brace for death, she froze, not because she believed him, but because she realized he believed himself. She had known storms far worse than this one. Ones that twisted the sky into ribbons of fire and static. Ones that swallowed lesser ships whole. Ones that broke engines and bones alike. She had a mind for patterns, for sound, for vibration, and for the language of machines. She heard the storm. She studied its rhythm. She felt its pull. And beneath all the fear and chaos, she felt one thing clearly. It hadn't claimed them. Yet, the engine core beside her sputtered again, a warning stutter of failing power. Deviece rose to her feet. Her braid, half undone, slapped against her back as she moved. The flight deck above rumbled violently, dust drifting down from the wooden beams. If she didn't act now, the captain's prediction would become real. She grabbed a coil of copper wiring, slung it over her shoulder, and snatched her tool satchel from its hook. Without hesitation, she pushed through the narrow maintenance corridor, as she climbed the steep ladder toward the main deck. The wind howled through the cracks in the ship like a starving wolf. The wooden frame shivered with every gust. Water dripped down the walls. The storm was truly trying to tear them apart. But Deviece was not afraid. When she pushed open the hatch door leading to the deck, the cold rain hit her like a wall. Thunder boomed overhead. Lightning flashed in jagged white arcs, reflecting off the soaked deck boards. Crew members clung to ropes and railings, their faces pale, their eyes wide. And there, drenched from head to toe, stood Captain Reddick, braced against the bow as if challenging the storm with his bare anger alone. Today, we are dead, he had said. Deviece stepped out fully onto the deck, closing the hatch behind her. The rain immediately soaked her clothing, weighing her down, but she didn't falter. Instead, she walked forward, purposefully, steadily, asterisk almost. No one noticed her at first. The chaos swallowed small movements and quiet voices. But when she passed by the trembling navigator and the panicked deckhands, heads began to turn. Asterisk, Deviece? Someone whispered asterisk, what's she doing up here? Another murmured asterisk. She kept moving, her boots slipping slightly on the slick boards, but she corrected her balance each time with effortless precision. She headed straight for the helm asterisk. By the time she reached the main deck stairway, most of the crew had seen her. Some watched with confusion, some with disbelief, and a few with desperate hope, as though any new presence, any unexpected spark of calm, might shift the hopeless momentum. Captain Reddick saw her last. He blinked as she approached, as though uncertain if she were real or some ghost conjured by the storm. Asterisk, what are you doing out here? He shouted over the winds. Get below. Deck, girl. The stabilizers are gone, the helm is useless, and the next gust will asterisk. Not today. She said it quietly, but the words cut through the storm like a blade. Asterisk Reddick stared at her. The crew stared at her. And for a moment, the storm itself seemed to hesitate. As if puzzled by her refusal, asterisk Deviece tightened her grip on her satchel. Rain dripped from her chin. Her eyes, sharp and glinting with determination, locked onto the captain's. Asterisk, you declared death too early, she said. I won't accept it. Asterisk thunder cracked so close the deckboard shook. A lantern chain snapped and swung wildly overhead, nearly striking two crewmen before they ducked. The ship lurched violently to the left, sending a spray of seawater whipping across the deck. Asterisk Reddick grabbed the nearest railing. This is no time for stubborn pride. The ship's coming apart. It's not something you can fix with a wrench. Good thing I brought more than a wrench, Deviece said. She stepped past him. Asterisk the crew parted instinctively. Not because she was loud or commanding, but because something in her demeanor, in her steady stride and unwavering eyes, projected a confidence none of them had felt since the storm began. She moved like someone who had already seen the path through the chaos and simply needed space to walk it. Asterisk lightning illuminated her face for a brief instant, focused, calm, unafraid. Asterisk, when she reached the helm, she placed a hand on the splintered control column. Sparks leaped from the exposed wires. She didn't flinch. Instead, she examined the damage with precise efficiency, her mind already racing through calculations. Asterisk Reddick staggered after her. Deviece, the controls are fried? The rudder isn't responding, the gyro reader's off its axis, and the engine's asterisk not dead yet. Deviece finished. Just panicked. Asterisk, he blinked at her. Engines don't panic. Asterisk, this one does. Asterisk, she dropped to one knee and began pulling tools from her satchel, pliers, clamps, a metal stabilizer, and several lengths of copper wire. Her fingers moved quickly, unfazed by the wet metal or the crackling electricity. She rerouted a wire, tightened a bolt, and adjusted a gear housing that none of the crew had dared touch. Asterisk another crack of lightning, another violent gust. The ship tilted hard, several crew shouting as the deck pitched beneath them. Asterisk but Deviece continued working, her expression unchanged. Asterisk, someone bring me a charged conductor coil. She called without looking up. Asterisk, the command carried authority, not loud, not harsh, but certain, and the crew obeyed. A deckhand sprinted toward the lower cabin, slipping twice before finally disappearing down the stairs. Asterisk Reddick stared at Deviece, drenched, shivering, stunned. Asterisk, you heard me, she said, meeting his eyes at last. We are not dying today. Asterisk, the ship groaned, the storm screamed, and the sky seemed to open its jaws wider. But Deviece had spoken, and fate had begun to shift. The deck heaved beneath Deviece as though the Valor's Wing were fighting for its life. The storm clawed at the airship with relentless fury, each gust a hammer, each bolt of lightning a white-hot brand against the sky. Crew members clung to ropes and rigging, their knuckles pale, their muscles locked with exhaustion and fear. The whole ship felt like a single heartbeat away from shattering. But at the helm, Deviece worked with a calm intensity that felt nearly supernatural. Her movements were quick but controlled neat twists of copper wiring, precise shifts of gears, expertly timed adjustments of voltage clamps. She ignored the violent rocking of the deck, ignored the roar of thunder above, ignored even the captain hovering behind her, torn between disbelief and hope. Her focus was absolute as she bent over the sparking helm console. Bolts of electricity snapped at her fingertips, scorching the metal. The heat was intense, and the moisture made every exposed coil dangerous. But Deviece didn't recoil. She caught a loose wire between her fingers and snapped it into place with a hiss of blue light. The ship lurched upward. Not much barely. A breath of lift, but the deck tilted just enough for every crew member to feel it. Someone gasped. Someone else shouted, "She did something!" And for the first time since the storm hit, a flicker of hope sparked across the deck. But Deviece didn't celebrate. Her eyes darted across the helm's interface, analyzing every jittering dial and flickering rune. The stabilizers were still offline. The rudder's drift patterns were erratic, and the gauge controlling elevation was bouncing so violently it might break free from its housing. We need more power to the port engine, she muttered. Port engine's barely holding. Captain Reddick shouted over the storm. It's overheating, the core's unstable, and the regulators are wrong, Deviece said sharply. He blinked at her. Wrong? The regulators didn't fail. They were overloaded. She reached beneath the helm and tightened another clamp. A cascade of sparks shot upward like tiny fireworks. She didn't even blink. Someone get me that conductor coil. She shouted. A moment later, the deckhand from before sprinted up the chin. Stairs, panting, clutching a bright blue coil wrapped in insulating cloth. The boy nearly slipped as the ship rocked again. But Deviece snatched the coil from his hands before he fell. Good, she said. Now get below deck and hold on to something secure. The boy nodded and fled. Deviece turned back to the controls and ripped open a charred metal plate, exposing the inner heart of the helm's energy conductor. Copper filaments glowed dangerously. Steam shot out in small bursts. The entire system was on the edge of meltdown. She didn't hesitate. She jammed the new conductor coil into place. Instantly, the helm roared to life. Blue energy arced through the controls, weaving through the machinery in a crackling dance of light. The runes etched along the panel glowed, then stabilized into a steady rhythm. The ship surged upward again. This time it was noticeable. A sharp lift, a powerful rise like the Valor's Wing had remembered how to fly. Reddick stumbled back, eyes wide. Saints above! You actually Don't thank me yet, Deviece said, tightening another bolt. We're not out of the storm. A sudden blast of wind hit the side of the ship. The deck tilted violently, sending crew members sprawling. A crate broke loose and slid across the deck, smashing into a stair railing and nearly taking two sailors with it. Deviece grabbed the helm wheel, what remained of it, and leaned her weight into it. The force nearly threw her off her feet, but she held firm. The ship leveled slightly, though it still groaned under the storm's pressure. Reddick leaned beside her, shouting into her ear. The rudder's not responding. You won't get turn. Control. Asterisk. I don't need the rudder. Deviece replied. Asterisk. She adjusted the power distribution along the helm's secondary conduits, rerouting energy to the wing stabilizers. A pair of mechanical feathers along the airship's flank shuddered, then extended with a grinding sound. The ship steadied further. Breaths caught across the deck. Some crew members dared to stand again. Others simply held their ropes a little. Less desperately, Asterisk Reddick stared at her in stunned awe. How are you doing this? Asterisk Device's hair-soaked and whipping across her face framed a small, determined smile. Asterisk, I rebuilt half this ship while you were sleeping, she said. I know what it can survive. Asterisk thunder boomed overhead, louder than before. Reddick glanced skyward. The storm's intensifying. We're heading into the heart of it. Asterisk. I know. Asterisk. Then we'll be torn apart. Asterisk. Not if we get above it. Asterisk Reddick blinked. Above it? We can't. Not with the altitude controls failing. Asterisk Device reached for the final set of wires sparking violently, dangerously unstable. She wrapped her hand in a strip of insulating cloth, ripped from her own sleeve, and grabbed the two ends of the circuit. Asterisk electricity surged upward, lighting. The air blew around her. She clenched her teeth and forced the wires together. Blast of pure energy shot through the helm. The deck vibrated. The entire ship groaned as though waking from a long, heavy nightmare. And then the Valor's wing lifted sharply. Asterisk crew members cried out in shock as the nose of the ship pointed upward, cutting through the darkest part of the storm. The engines wailed, pushing against forces no machine should withstand. Asterisk, everyone hold on, Device shouted. This will hurt. Asterisk. The ship rocketed upward, slicing through the swirling black vortex. Rain pummeled the deck. Lightning scraped across the hull. The engine screamed in protest, but they were rising, higher, higher still, higher until the clouds thinned, until the darkness softened, until the vibration of the storm lessened. Asterisk with one last violent push. The Valor's wing burst through the top of the thunderhead and into sunlight. Golden rays spilled across the battered deck. The sky above was a calm, brilliant blue. The storm roared beneath them like a defeated beast they had outflown. The crew stared in stunned silence. Some cried, some laughed, some simply collapsed with relief. Asterisk Captain Reddick turned to Device, his voice thick with emotion. Asterisk, you saved us. Asterisk Device, sweating, burned, bruised, soaked, exhausted, leaned against the helm and took one long, steadying breath. Asterisk, we're not safe yet, she said, but we're alive. Asterisk and? For the first time since the storm began, Captain Reddick smiled. Asterisk, thanks to you. The sunlight spilled across the Valor's wing like a blessing. Warm, golden, impossibly calm compared to the chaos beneath the clouds. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. No one even breathed. The crew stood scattered across the battered deck in stunned silhouettes, wide-eyed and trembling, as if afraid that the light might vanish the instant they acknowledged it. Asterisk. The storm still churned below the ship, a vast roiling sea of black clouds, lightning still flickering deep within its swirling depths. But up here, above it, the sky was a breathtaking, endless blue. They had made it. Against all logic, against all odds, against the captain's own grim declaration. Asterisk. And because of a woman most of them had barely noticed until today. Asterisk Deviece finally let go of the helm. She staggered backward, not from the ship's movement now, but from the exhaustion that swept over her like a breaking wave. The adrenaline that had powered her through the storm drained from her limbs, leaving her legs quivering, her arms heavy. and sore. Sweat, rain, and grime mixed on her face. One of her sleeves was scorched black. Her knuckles stung from burns. But she was alive. They were all alive. Quiet ripple moved across the deck, voices rising softly at first, disbelief melting into relief, fear dissolving into laughter, and shaky tears. We did it,
murmured
one of the sailors. We made it out. Saints above. She saved us. The murmurs grew, strengthening into cheers. Someone whooped triumphantly. Another pounded the deck with their fist in celebration. A group of deckhands embraced, crying openly. The relief was overwhelming, pouring out of each person like a flood loosed from behind a shattered dam. Deviece tried to smile, but her body was too tired to fully obey. Instead, she just sank to the deck's edge and let herself breathe long. Slow, steady breaths. The air tasted different up here, clean, sharper, almost sweet after the tang of ozone and the bite of storm-charged wind. Captain. Reddick approached her slowly. The man looked entirely different from the fierce, commanding figure who had declared their doom just minutes ago. His hat was gone, ripped off by the wind. His coat was torn down one arm. His beard was dripping with rain and sweat, and his face, usually rugged, stern, unshakable, looked strangely soft with vulnerability and awe. He stood before her for a long moment, saying nothing. His chest rose and fell with deep, heavy breaths, the relief still settling into his bones. Deviece looked up at him. "You all right?" she asked quietly. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half disbelieving scoff. "You're asking me if I'm all right?" She shrugged. "Someone should." Reddick exhaled hard, then sank into a crouch beside her. He studied her face with a mixture of gratitude, confusion, and something like regret. "I said we were dead," he murmured, as if confessing a failing he had carried too long. "I believed it. I felt the storm swallow us whole. And I thought there was no point in pretending otherwise." Deviece brushed a stray strand of wet hair from her eyes. "You weren't wrong to be afraid." "Fear's not what bothered me," Reddick said softly. "It was surrender. I've never given up on this ship, on this crew, and yet, for the first time, I did." He shook his head, ashamed. "You didn't," Deviece replied. Reddick blinked. "I most certainly did." She pointed at the helm. "If you'd truly given up, you wouldn't have held the ship steady long enough for me to do anything. You may have said the words, Captain, but your hands were still fighting." Reddick swallowed hard. The sunlight reflected in his wet eyes. "Maybe," he whispered. "But you fought harder." Deviece didn't respond. She didn't need to. The wind brushed lightly over the deck, now gentle, warm, carrying the calm hum of distant clouds instead of the violent roar of a raging storm. The crew slowly regained themselves, gathering to assess damages, support injured comrades, and secure loose equipment. Reddick rose to his feet and turned to face the crew. "Everyone!" he shouted. The voices quieted. One by one, the crew members straightened, turning their attention to their captain. Reddick's voice boomed across the deck, not commanding, but carrying the full weight of humility and pride. "You all saw what happened. You know how close we were to breaking apart. You know how close we were to being swallowed by that storm." He paused, glancing at the dark cloud sea beneath them. "And you know who saved us?" A murmur rippled through the crew. Heads turned toward Deviece, who was still sitting on the deck, exhausted but listening. Reddick continued, "I've captained this ship for 20 years. I've led us through battles, storms, and dangers more numerous than I can count. But today, this woman led us. This woman carried us. This woman kept us alive." He pointed at Deviece. "Today we stand in the sun because she refused to let us fall into darkness." Asterisk, the crew erupted into cheers. Loud, unrestrained, heartfelt cheers that echoed across the open sky. They stomped their boots, clapped their hands, and shouted her name. Asterisk Deviece, asterisk Deviece, asterisk Deviece. She lifted a hand, embarrassed but smiling faintly. "I'm not a hero," she said quietly. Asterisk Reddick heard her. He stepped closer and extended a hand to help her stand. Asterisk, "You are today," he said simply. Asterisk, she took his hand and rose to her feet. Her legs trembled, but Reddick steadied her with surprising gentleness. Asterisk, the cheers slowly died down as the crew returned to their duties. Repairs needed doing. Injuries needed tending. The ship needed stabilizing. But the weight of dread that had suffocated them earlier was gone, replaced by something fierce and bright. Hope. Deviece stood beside the helm, looking out across the ocean of clouds. The storm brewed beneath them, powerful and timeless. It would rage long after they were gone. It didn't care who they were. It didn't care if they survived. But she cared, and she had chosen to fight. Asterisk, Captain Reddick stepped beside her, hands clasped behind his back. Asterisk, "You saved my crew," he said. "You saved my ship." Asterisk, Deviece shook her head. "Not yours." "Ours." Asterisk, Reddick's eyes softened. "Aye, ours." Asterisk, the sun warmed their faces as the Valor's Wing soared above the storm, battered but unbroken. Asterisk, "Captain," Deviece said, her voice quiet but firm. Asterisk, "Yes?" She looked him directly in the eyes. "You said today we were dead." Asterisk, he nodded slowly. "I did." She smiled, small, confident, unstoppable. "I said not today." Asterisk, and high above the raging storm, carried by the brilliance of a new sky, her words felt less like defiance and more like destiny.